Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Ishvaro Guratmati Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sarvavedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatosh Maham Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Welcome. We're on page 121, 121. The mantra is the mantra for chapter 2. Brahman is known when it's realized in every state of mind, for by such knowledge one attains immortality. Only by such knowledge, according to our scriptures, one attains immortality. By Atman, one attains strength. And what else is in there? It was cut, this one here. Strength. By knowledge, immortality. So I mentioned that I want to see what Swami says about by Atman, one obtains strength. But I think Swamiji does not address that part, but maybe I missed it when I read it the other day. Let's see. So we know that only by knowledge, yeah, not by a state of mind, one gets to know Brahman as oneself, oneself, one very true intrinsic nature, the only reality, consciousness of non-dual nature. So, and here we say that in every state, it does not require a specific state, although one needs to develop a more sattva guna, so that we have a more contemplative, meditative, inquiring state of mind. So our state of mind should be improved, our general state of mind, not in a specific, but generally speaking, the mind should be refined and purified so that once Brahman is realized, it is seen regardless of all fluctuations or change in the state of the mind of the one who knows that Brahman is one's very nature. Okay? So for by such a knowledge only one attains immortality. As we know, immortality is the true nature of everything as limitless conscious existence. Once we shift our sense of identity from the mortal body mind to the immortal conscious existence, and then we have achieved, quote unquote, immortality, but we do not achieve anything. But because our true nature is the immortal, atemporal, akarta, avokta consciousness. So if one is already this immortal principle, so why to do sadhana to realize one's immortal principle, immortal real nature, if one is already this immortal uh, reality? So what you say, Mark, in regards to that? Why to all this fuss?
I say because we don't have the peace of mind because we don't know that we're immortal. Once we know that, that gives us a certain peace of mind, which we can then go ahead and live our life well and calmly out in the world. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well put. And furthermore, I mean, what is the benefit of being a limitless consciousness if you do not know and therefore, under the spell of ignorance, you believe that you are the physical body, and then you suffer your human experience. So it does not help the jiva, who is an experiencing entity. He is immortal, but he's so hardly hardwired to believe that he is the mortal body that he does not enjoy his or her passage in here. So that's why this knowledge is very, very unique and important, because you already are, but you cannot enjoy it. You cannot really appreciate it. Right, Lynn?
Absolutely.
This is the most profound verse of the entire Kenopanishad, says Swamiji. And he says this is the most profound, actually, in fact, of all the spiritual literature, Vedantic or spiritual literature, as a very comprehensive mantra, very important, because the method of gaining Brahmayana is present here. The procedure of gaining Brahmayana is present here. And before, in the previous verse in the Keno, it was not yet presented here. So the sadhana, the procedure, how to go about to get this yanam has been profoundly exposed here and unfolded, because you cannot say, as we know, that I know Brahman completely and totally, because that goes to the misconception of I know Brahman as this or that. So one may know Brahman as consciousness, and I am consciousness. Yet this knowledge is only possible to the extent that we know everything is it. Everything is conscious existence. And therefore, any and all ornaments of gold, they enjoy this free nature as gold alone. And some of them may know it, and they may relax once they are brought to the lab to be melted to become different ornaments. So we know this as I know I am it, as I was putting in the last class. I know I am consciousness, but I don't know exactly what it is. Consciousness. I know what it means to be consciousness. What it means that I don't need to be really concerned with anything, because consciousness is one without a second. It's limitless, infinite, the only principle, and so on. No, nothing can affect consciousness, my true nature. My mind may be a fact, and it is a fact here and there. And once I know I'm consciousness, my identity is transferred in such a way that it reduce those extreme concerns, most of the concerns, I would say, regards to what's going to happen to our body mind. So everybody knows that what happens to the body, the body goes to the grave, and the mind may go to some lokas we hear, and the mind may come back on another body, but we are not sure about that. But the scriptures say so. But the physical body, we know it's going to be burned one day. And the sense of the sadhana, the method presented here in a few sentences, is properly elaborated. The Upanishad says Brahman has to be understood or realized as the non-variable consciousness. So the mind is a variable principle because it's always changing, always modifying in contact with different objects. But there is a non-variable principle, which is conscious existence, that is absolutely unchanging. Because of this non-variable consciousness alone, all experience and all forms of knowledge are possible. We know the changing world, Jew, to the unchanging consciousness that blesses the body-mind changing instrument of experience to provide it with experience and knowledge. No, experience brings about knowledge. Swamiji says, I will repeat, Brahman has to be understood as non-variable consciousness in the mind. So, as we know, the mind and consciousness, they are so intimately associated, you know, that it becomes very difficult for people to discern and to discriminate the mind from consciousness because they are so, the mind is so profoundly superimposed. The mind is subtle. The mind is very, very invisible, yeah, to the eyes and so on, to the touch, to the senses. And consciousness is the most subtle of the subtle. So when you superimpose something very subtle on something which is extremely subtle, so it's difficult to discern what is what. You understand? So the scripture comes to help us to do this viveka, to understand the very subtle mind from the extremely subtle consciousness, the only reality or the true nature of the mind. Brahman has to be understood as the non-variable consciousness operating the mind or side by side with the mind, hand to hand with the mind, because of which alone all experience and all forms of knowledge are possible. So we're going to go in a very nice conversation about knowledge, how knowledge takes place. Not only Brahman has to be understood as a consciousness, also one has to understand that consciousness is Brahman, which, by the way, is everything. Therefore, I cannot exclude myself from everything. Therefore, I myself am also conscious existence of non-dual nature. I have to understand that Brahman is consciousness, the only reality. And since I understood that it is one without a second, the only reality, I, the body-mind entity, cannot exclude myself from this only reality, which is Brahman. Yeah. My physical body, we could say, is a gross superimposition on Brahman. My subtle body is a fine, subtle superimposition. It can be refined and purified to become subtle and subtle, until this purified mind can understand this difference. And then once it sees pure, limitless consciousness and the body mind, which is a reflection of this original pure consciousness, once I have understood the difference, I have a very subtle, discriminating, discerning mind. And then it's left the most important last step in this process, which is claim one of the two as my true nature. So therefore, claiming, we should never be forgotten, missed. Also, one has to understand that consciousness is myself. So Brahman is no variable consciousness. No variable consciousness is everything, including myself. In this manner alone, Brahman has to be known. This is the essence of the first part on this verse. Shankaracharya writes a very brilliant commentary on this mantra, the gist of his Bhashyam. I will share here. First, we have to note that every experience and every knowledge that we have throughout the awakening state involves two factors operating within the mind. This is very nice. I love this conversation. So there are two factors behind any thought or any experience in the awakening state. Every experience in the awake and every experience, we have to understand, put in perspective, that the experience allows us knowledge. The other animals may get some knowledge. I see that they get some knowledge, but it's not very clear. But in the case of the human beings, we have let's say, a more complex mind or intelligence. And then we have experience, and the purpose of those experience, of all experience, is the extraction of knowledge. And as we know, when we extract knowledge from the experience, usually we are under the pressure of our vasanas and biases and so on. So it's extraction of knowledge from direct sensory experience, which is done by the mind, which has its vasanas or tendencies and biases. This extraction is not something very easy to be done. So as a result, we live life during the waking hours, and then we contact objects of experience all the time, and then we extract some knowledge. And unfortunately, we could say that most or some of this knowledge is not good knowledge. You understand? Unfortunate. So why we have the scriptures? The scriptures are there trying to guide us to look, examine our experience in a way that we can extract knowledge in the light of what the scriptures are revealing. So we have this pure knowledge presenting us something which relates to any and all day-to-day common experience we have that are going to reveal reality from unreality. So, how to extract knowledge from experience? We need to be educated by the scriptures, they reveal the scriptures that are going to allow us, in the light of the teachings, to see things more clearly. You know? So, we have experience providing us the potential for good knowledge, allowing for a lot of bad knowledge, allowing also for what we have experienced, but our experience already so conditioned by education, by official narratives, fake news, or propaganda, or whatever, because once we have some powers controlling the narrative, they control the perception of reality through narratives, and then our knowledge is further more compromised. Our ability to extract good knowledge. We have the example of the snake and the rope again and again. So you're walking and then you stumble on something. You see a snake, but it's a rope. So that is a bad knowledge, and you take it to be a snake experience. And then what are you gonna do with it? So you're going to experience great fear, and disturbance, and then your discriminating faculty is going to further, deteriorate, decay, and then you're emotionally involved, and so on, all because your perception of anathema things, it's not a perception of reality. Perception of the apparent reality is compromised by too much rajas and tamas and bad knowledge, which is well established in my subconscious mind, my vasana load, my tendency to see things in a certain way. Every experience or every knowledge happens in the mind because of two factors. And then this factor is important. The first factor is a relevant thought that should arise in the mind. Every time the mind contacts an object, it got in contact with an object, we have the five senses, and then we have the ego mind, and then a thought will show up. The thought in this case could be snake or rope. Okay, so that is the relevant thought. If the thought is a snake, that thought has to be re-examined and revised and corrected. You know. So this is what it means, relevant thoughts, because you may have different thoughts about someone or something, but in the end, your vasana load, your mind is going to determine, no, this is my decision. The relevant thought here is this is bad or this is good. Understand? So the relevant thought, let's keep it in mind. When the mind through the sense organ comes in contact with any object, when I look in the direction of a tree, for example, the mind through the sense organs come in contact with that tree. And when the mind tree thought takes place in my mind, if I pay attention to the tree, that is registered in the form of a thought. What is a tree is appearing with a thought tree. So you have the tree and you have the thought tree. There is another element that Swamiji brought in here. If I am paying attention to the tree, because a lot of the time we see things, but our awareness, our conscious attention is not there. So I have the tree, I have a thought of the tree if I pay attention, you know. But a tree, once, if apprehended correctly, I say this is a good relevant thought. But if by any mistake it was a post light, okay, a fancy post light with some, imitate something like that, and then I may say this is a tree. And somebody next to me will say, no, it's not a tree, it's a post light. So we have these two elements, the object and the thought, the label we give to that object. This is what it is. And I need to pay attention, because a lot of the time I see things, but I will not pay attention. I don't register, and then there is not knowledge taking place. Knowledge as this is my knowledge. This is a tree. Merely turning the direction of our head to a certain object does not give knowledge, because in that direction there are other things. There is a wall behind. There are so many things. I mean, I'm looking here, so there is a bed, so there are so many objects. So I have to just bring my attention to one object, and then I'm aware. And then the relevant thought is going to be about that relevant object producing a relevant thought. He says, I give you an example. My eyes are open. So many students are here, but I don't pay attention. So I don't see really. I don't have a thought, a knowingness of someone as so and so. But the moment that student begins coughing or stand up or get distracted, my attention goes to the student. And then the student comes to my awareness, and I have a thought in regards to that specific student. So that is the registration which took place, and the relevant thought is this person, so and so person. If someone asks, did this student come in or not? Sometimes people would ask Swamiji, oh, that person was present in the class today. He say, I don't know. I was looking to the entire class, but I was not searching for people specifically. And he says there is a difference between seeing and noticing. Yeah? That registration has to take place in a form of a thought which is called antakarana vritti. It's a very specific, relevant thought in regards to one object. So as we know, when we drive our car, we even forget the road, the asphalt, and many things. We go in automatic, and those thoughts in regards to this object, especially on the side road, we don't pay attention. So not only the thought should take place, this thought should be relevant to the object. So I should have a thought, and it should be relevant to the object, meaning to say, if I see a dog, the thought should not be it is a cat. Okay, so if it is a cat thought becomes relevant, but it's a mistaken relevant thought, I would say. If there is a rope, what thought it should be? Rope thought. But if I get a snake thought, immediately I'm going to have a reaction, because I'm going to have begin to experience a snake by having a wrong knowledge. The thought is relevant every time we experience noticing and paying attention to anything. We have an experience. The experience of any object comes with the relevant thought in regards to that object. And experience are continuously changing, and then things are so complex that we are hitting objects and having different feelings and sensations and experience, because every object produces thought, and the thought is already loaded with connotations because we had similar experience. What is a trauma? A trauma is a thought of something that has caused so much pain in the past that not necessarily must cause pain now. But when I think of something which is relevant to some traumatic experience, I'm going to begin feeling very, very uncomfortable. And we continuously contact the words of object, the word of object, and knowledge is taking place, or forms of knowledge are constantly taking place. Thoughts are continuously changing with the objects, and sometimes we the same objects we are debating about what thought we're going to give to that object, what good or bad, desirable or undesirable, favorable or unfavorable category we're going to place them. So everything is changing. It's crazy. Therefore, variable thoughts generate variable experience all the time during the waking state, in the dream state. And those variable experiences are going to be producing variable knowledge. Knowledge. Variable thoughts generate variable experience and variable knowledge throughout the waking hours. Vedanta says the thought alone is not enough for gaining. He's not going to dive into the nature of those relevant thoughts, whether they are in harmony with reality, the apparent reality. The only thoughts in relationship to the ultimate reality is not really a thought. It's just like Satchitananda, the nature of reality. But an Atma world, it is apparent reality, and there is all kinds of thoughts we need and try to get proper, relevant thoughts in regards to those objects. Fundamentally, Vedanta is inviting us to see everything as just elements, you know, deprived of real intrinsic value, and understand that I'm projecting value based on my previous experience with similar objects with producing. So it is complex. We need a guide, we need a scripture that help us to discriminate between Dharma and Adharma, because all of this boils down to discriminate the anathema world of numberless objects from the standpoint of dharmic and the dharmic. Is it going to help me to elevate myself and favor others as well or not? Is this a good thought? Is this a bad thought? Am I accessing this situation and objects in a health proper way or not? Vedanta also says, that the thought alone is not enough for gaining knowledge. So now, I was trying to make this passage a little bit more complex, but simplify it. Vedanta says that thought alone is not enough for gaining knowledge because thought is part of the mind. So thought is something, is a modification that happens in the mind, is a byproduct of the elements, the subtle elements. And those five subtle elements are inert, as we know. Their nature is inert. Therefore, thoughts are inert. Inert thoughts cannot give rise to an experience. So the thought does not give rise to an experience. There is something else that's blessing the thought, blessing the mind to produce an experience. So we know what that something else is. And that's why I'm saying that's why the inert wall cannot have an experience or thought or anything. It is absolutely inert. But we say, but the mind has experience, okay? Don't tell me that the mind is inert because the mind is having experience. When Vedanta says, wait a moment, it is having experience because it's blessed by consciousness. Consciousness is going to make the mind sentient and able to experience and feel the media objects in one's environment. And then the game of life is what? Having experience to extract knowledge. Therefore, thought itself is not capable of having an experience. But in truth, it's important we do the discrimination, but in truth, you can never have a thought without consciousness. You understand? Therefore, thought itself is incapable of having an experience. But have you ever seen a thought with not backed up by consciousness producing an experience? So this is a discrimination we have to do in retrospective, but it's on a practical level. There is no chance we can have a thought which is not producing experience because it's always blessed by consciousness. But if we could, separate the two and look at the thought and see this is inert. Why? Because it does not produce experience. There is no such a thing because a thought that does not produce experience is not a thought. A thought happens within consciousness, and consciousness is going to bless that thought with an experience. You understand what I'm trying to say? From the practical level, they are never apart. Therefore, in addition to thought, we require another important component because of which thought becomes knowledge. So now he's saying there is something which is going to bless the thought with consciousness, which will allow knowledge. So a thought vrich becomes a yanan vrich. Vrich becomes pratyaya. Vrich becomes anubhava. I don't remember those terms. Do you remember? Pratyaya and anubhava? I forgot.
Pratyaya is understanding and anubhava experience.
Yeah, anubhava experience. Yeah. Great. So we're going to have everything only due to consciousness, as we know. And we can never have a thought producing experience if the thought is not blessed or backed up by consciousness. So Swami says, and what is this factor? And then he says, this consciousness principle which pervades the entire body-mind. It pervades the subtle body, and in the subtle body, thoughts are going to appear. The thoughts are not self-contained with sentience. Consciousness lends sentience to the mind, which transfers to every thought, which allows the mind to gain knowledge, and this knowledge may or may not be good knowledge. Therefore, thought and consciousness put together brings about knowledge. Thought by itself is not knowledge. Consciousness by itself is not knowledge. Again, there is no such a thing as a thought by itself, because thought exists within the scope of consciousness. And then we have knowledge. But if we could separate thought from consciousness and have a thought without consciousness as the ground, the understanding, and then we say thought alone does not bring about experience and knowledge. Experience and knowledge requires the subtle body, the reflecting medium, producing thoughts, and all of that is blessed by consciousness, as we know. Though consciousness mixture alone is knowledge, thought and consciousness mixture brings about knowledge. And once I know that every knowledge and every experience is a mixture of thought and consciousness, the question comes, is the consciousness also variable and changing as the thoughts? So once I know this, that I need these two principles, consciousness and thoughts, to have experience, to have knowledge, the question comes, what is what? What is consciousness and what is the thought? And what is the experience and what is the knowledge? How can I separate those things, those subtle principles? Yeah? So, what is consciousness? What is thought? What is knowledge? What is the experience I'm having here that I feel emotionally as well? You know, all of this is possible because consciousness bless the mind, the subtle body, providing it with all these different functions such as feeling, determining, discerning, learning, knowing. And furthermore, there is a question, is this consciousness blessing the subtle body, allowing experience to not? Is this consciousness also variable and changing as the thoughts and the experiences and the knowledge, even the knowledge change because I need to revise them over and over again? And what is the answer? We have to remember. Yeah. Otherwise, we will not understand. All these are procedural steps. We have to necessarily go through these steps to be fully convinced. Such is a variable component of this mixture. Consciousness is the non-variable principle, not changing, and it's not part of the mixture. It's the adhistanam, it's the ground of conscious existence. It is the screen, it's the mirror like on which thoughts, feelings, and experience and knowledge play. So that's nothing new for us. We know what is changing, what is not changing, what is variable, what is not. We know that we can never have a thought without consciousness. We never have established a certain knowledge which is subject to revision and so on without the blessings of consciousness. Life seems to be a play of these two principles to allow us a certain degree of wisdom that, according to our scriptures, allow us to get out of here and be free as our true nature or not. Every knowledge consists of changing thoughts and unchanging consciousness. In Sanskrit, Bor means every cognition, every knowledge, every experience is a mixture of changing thought and changeless consciousness. But since the thought and consciousness are so intimately mixed together, many people mistake consciousness as an integral part of the mind. Most common people believe that consciousness that consciousness is the mind, and it's another thought within the mind. Many people mistake that consciousness is part, product, or property of mind, and mind is but a bundle of thoughts. Because we experience them together all the time, we have a hard time to do this viveka, this discerning, the term, the difference, the distinction, the separate. It's not even, I mean, there are no words to describe it. It's not really separate, but it's not the same. Every thoughts are reduced to consciousness as consciousness. Consciousness is the only principle, the only reality. Blessing the thoughts, producing experiences and knowledges. Vedanta wishes to make it clear consciousness is in every thought as the adistana, or the ground, or the reflecting medium. But it's not part of a thought. It's not property of a thought. It's not a product of a thought. It is different from thought, but it's there inseparably together with every thought. As what? As the substratum, as the ground. Remember moonlight. Moonlight and moon we experience together. So how can we separate the light of the moon and the moon? No? But there is a distinction there. One thing is the moon. Another thing is the moonlight. When I look at the moon in a full moon, it's very beautiful, but it's very difficult to discriminate the moon from the moonlight. As we know, we take the moonlight to be a byproduct or property of the moon, but it's not. It's an independent, free principle. Huh? In certain circumstances, it shines in the moon. In the same way, in certain circumstances, such as the awakened state, consciousness shining in the human intellect. We use the word moonlight, committing this mistake. Moonlight, we know there is no such a thing as light of the moon. Moon does not have any light. Thought does not have any light. Thought is not really any source of consciousness. Consciousness is free and independent from, from the subtle body, from thoughts, feelings, emotions, experience, and whatsoever knowledge we collect in this duality. This moonlight is not part. This moonlight is not a product. This moonlight is not property of the moon. It's an independent principle which pervades or shines in the moon. It's not limited by the boundaries of the moon because this light is shining all over the space, but it somehow becomes visible when there is a reflecting medium. Yeah? Subtle bodies are reflecting medium, then consciousness become visible as what? Human consciousness or mind. And then we think, this is the big deal. Real deal is human consciousness. No. How can you tell people that what you are is totally free and independent from your human consciousness or your mind? People do not. I mean, it's so hard. I have people that I engage here and there, and they don't even come close to understand it, and they don't want to engage in this Vedantic process. They go misled right and left, and they don't get it. They are not qualified. Why moon does not have any light? Why we call it moonlight then? Similarly, thought is like a reflection on the moon, a light, the moonlight, and consciousness is the real light. They are together, but they are independent. Well, sunlight is free and independent from moonlight. Moonlight is totally dependent on, the sunlight. Likewise, consciousness is free and independent from the mind. The mind is totally dependent on consciousness, as we know. One is dependent and changing and limited. One is independent, unchanging, and limitless. So, which one of the two you want to establish your identity with? For self-knowledge or Brahmayana or Atmayana to take place, the first step is what? Turning the attention from the changing mind, the changing thoughts, producing experience and knowledge. Okay? The first step, again, the first step is turning your attention from the changing phenomenal world that begins with your changing mind as the instrument, the primary instrument to access the changing world. Everything is changing. The changing instrument is contact the changing world. And you want to know something which is said to be unchanging. Self-knowledge, knowledge in respect to that principle which is unchanging. You need to have an unchanging principle to access the changing world. The first step is turning the attention from the changing thoughts in regards to the changing world to the non-changing consciousness, the only reality. And then we have that simple pointer. I am conscious of one object of experience or other. And then that object goes away. And then a second object comes, and then I'm conscious of the second object. Has the consciousness witnessing principle changed, or the objects have changed, bringing about different thoughts, experience, and knowledge? Huh? Everything is changing. The second object came into place, but consciousness becomes one unchanging principle, limitless principle. All the time I am conscious, and this consciousness is my true nature, and it's changeless by nature. Whatsoever I am conscious of is a changing phenomenon, therefore it's not real. And I'm fascinated with the changing phenomenal world. And the Vedanta say you have to change your direction. Your attention has to go from the changing phenomenal world to the unchanging consciousness, the light, illumining and revealing the changing world. I am conscious. Conscious is a non-changing fact to everyone who follow these teachings of Vedanta, paying attention, examining one's experience. Therefore, turn the attention towards that consciousness principle, the unvariable, unchanging principle, the only reality. Then the next step is what? To turn the attention toward consciousness principle. You should not look for consciousness as an object of knowledge/experience, like I do with everything. Consciousness is not an object because it is free of any possible quality or attributes, and it's not changing. OMCT. It does not fall in the category of the OMCT, as we know. If it does not have OMCT, I cannot have an objective knowledge of consciousness. Therefore, I understood that I want to change my attention to that principle which is unchanging. But I don't want to turn my attention to that principle as if reducing that to one more object of knowledge, experience. I will never know Brahman or consciousness in that way. Once I have established this distinction, I have done this viveka between consciousness and the mind, the thoughts. I have understood that every thought is an object happening within consciousness. Consciousness is not an object, but it's the subject. It happens to be I, the subject itself. This consciousness is the I myself, searching for everything, and then at a certain point in my life, I'm looking for consciousness in the field of objects, in the changing phenomenal world of objects, and then I have to just hold my tendency there and say, no, I'm not looking for consciousness because the consciousness is the I subject principle. The I, the Aham, the reflect consciousness, the Aham is in its true nature consciousness. Unchanging consciousness produces unchanging thoughts in respect to every object. Therefore, I am the consciousness principle mingling with the changing thoughts of this changing world. These changing thoughts, they rise and fall, changing from moment to moment, but consciousness remains absolutely unchanging, blessing every phenomenal, subtle, and physical changing object of this changing world. Only I, consciousness, am aware of the thought and the object. Therefore, thought is an object. Non-variable consciousness is the subject. So how I'm going to know consciousness as the only subject there is? That's why I said it's non-dual Vedanta. Vedanta talks about the only reality as something which is one without a second, meaning to say there are no divisions, there are no two, there is only one consciousness. And the consciousness is the I, the subject principle. Do you understand these steps? Two are there. Two are there. You should remember and understand. One is changing and the other is non-changing. The non-changing consciousness is not an object but the subject. Thoughts are objects, but the consciousness is I, who I am aware of the body-mind changing in contact with the changing world. And then Swami presents us a line that he refers as a very brilliant line that says, everything changes. The world changes, the body changes, the mind changes violently at times. Emotions change violently at times. The thoughts are changing. In and through all these changing things, there is one changeless witness consciousness principle, because of which I say, I was a boy, I'm now a youth, yeah, and I'm now an oldie. Thus, that I am, and nothing more. I am the unchanging I am. Non variable I am refers to the non variable consciousness. Up to this, we should come and retain this clarity of darshana, vision, and the veka between the unchanging and the changing. Then comes a very, very, very big, tough leap. Now that we have done those two steps first, understand that there are two principles. Understand that one principle is unchanging and the other is changing. One is variable and the other is unvariable. There is a big step waiting for us, which is from Mahavakya Shravana, the final declarations of identity present by in the Upanishads mostly. What is the relationship between I, the non-changing consciousness, and everything else that is changing? Thoughts, words, feelings, emotions, people, place, things. What is the relation between Sat and Mitya, the non-changing consciousness, and everything else? Everything else means what? All. The world, the body, the sense, the mind, the thoughts, all these are changing. All these are in the category of OMACT. Therefore, what is the relationship between I, the observer, witness, consciousness, and everything from the thought onwards. Yeah. What is the relationship between I and the mind, the thoughts, the feeling, the experience, and the knowledge I collect in contact with this world? What is the relationship between these two principles? What is the relationship between consciousness and matter, or spirit and matter? And then Swam says that here, most of the philosophers commit blunder. What is blunder, Lynn?
It's a mistake.
Shankya philosophy says both of them are independent. The changing world and the changing consciousness, they are both free and independent. Therefore, duality is reality. We have two different, independent principles. We have two parallel principles. One is a changing principle, the other is unchanging principle. They are independent. So if something is independent, it's something that is real because it does not depend on anything. It's self-contained with existence. It's an independent. If the world is self-contained with existence, it is real. Therefore, we have a situation in which we have two realities or duality as reality. Non-changing consciousness and the changing world of matter, thoughts, and so on. If both are independent, both are eternal and parallel realities, Vedanta says they are. So if they are eternal, we accept. But the eternal Mithya world depends on the eternal Satya reality, the only reality. These philosophers have brought about what we call Dvaita Darshana, the vision, reality is duality, whereas modern science says there are no two things. Matter and consciousness are related. Modern science says there are no two things. Matter and consciousness are related. Shankya says non-related because they are independent. Here Swamiji is saying that even science is understanding that consciousness and matter, they have a relationship, meaning to say that one principle depends on the other. Science puts it more in terms of one principle relates to the other as cause and effect. Karya Karana, relationship between consciousness and matter. And which one is Karana and which one is Karyan? Modern science says that matter is Karana, is the real cause, and consciousness is the effect. And then even science mess up that knowledge. Modern science says matter is the fundamental Satya principle. Consciousness is a byproduct, is a temporary phenomenon which happens as a product or property in the brain, within the brain. For how long? Until you lost breath. When I die, what happens to consciousness? It goes. It's over. Thus, they talk about a cause and effect relationship. Science talks on those terms. They say that matter and energy is the karanam, and consciousness, which is the mind, is an effect. So Chaitanya becomes a cause and the mind becomes an effect. This is a huge mistake committed by modern science, whereas with the Shankya philosophy, the mistake is slightly different. It just says that they're both a reality and those both are beginningless, limitless principles, independent from one another. So then comes Vedanta to go against nearly all kind of assessment into the nature of reality. Vedanta comes and dismisses both philosophies and most of all philosophies. Vedanta says that consciousness and matter are not two parallel independent realities because reality is non-dual, is one principle, lending apparent reality to other principles. Consciousness and matter are two not parallel independent realities. They have a cause and effect relationship. And what is the cause and what is the effect? Well, if we come to study Mandukya Karika, even this concept of cause and effect between consciousness and matter and the world, the change world, is going to be challenged. But for most of us, it's important to understand if there is a cause and effect relationship, this has to be correctly understood that consciousness is the causeless, apparent cause of the universe. Nothing causes consciousness, but consciousness appears to cause the world. How so? A certain power brought by Maya Ishwara, you know. So we need to understand what is the real cause and what is the real effect. And furthermore, as good Vedantins, we understand the effect is just a mithya effect. It's not a real effect. Vedanta says consciousness is the ultimate cause. Satyam Yanam Anantam Brahman. So I, the non-variable consciousness, am the only reality, Brahman. What type of Brahman? What Brahman we are talking about here? I consciousness, which is Brahman alone. The entire world is born out of me. Again and again. Just as the dream world again and again rises from me and resolves back into me again, so in the same way, the entire universe, world, you know, also born from me and rests back and resolves on me into me again and again. Or Aham Karanam Brahman, I am the Brahman, the cause of the entire universe. This word which is Karya. Aham Karanam Brahman Jagata Karyan, something like that. And once you say word is Karyan, it does not have an independent existence on its own. Why? A product cannot exist apart from its cause. You cannot take the cause of something from a product. If you take the gold from all ornaments, the ornaments are gone. A product cannot exist separate from its cause. Ornaments do not exist separate from gold. Furniture does not exist separate from the wood. Therefore, this world made of numberless configurations of the gunas of Maya and the subtle elements and so on, this world, you know, all of them basically they depend upon consciousness, which is this the fundamental substance, which is not a substance, but it is the substratum, better word to be putting it, a substrate on which Maheshwara pulls off the gunas and the elements to bring about numberless namarupas. We call the world, the mithya world of object. Brahman Yana exists only in one manner. Brahman is consciousness. God is consciousness. Consciousness is me. I am therefore the cause of the entire creation. Aham Satyam Jagam Mithya. I am Satyam. I am the only reality. I, in my true nature, I have done this viveka in such a way that I'm no longer mixed up with the mind, transferring attributes of the mind to my true nature's limitless, pure, unchanging consciousness. Now I know that everything was made out of me, the same way all ornaments are made out of gold. Therefore, I am the cause, the causeless cause of this apparent universe. Okay, as I have announced before, these verses are going to get only better and better. Hmm? And we're going to have great fun in the days to come, beginning this coming Monday. I'm back to my home today, properly settled, and we meet again this coming Monday. Okay? Namaste. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate Om Shanti 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 Om. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sylvia. She's here. Namaste.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Bye now.
Bye bye.